It is now my pleasure to introduce John L. Hennessy, the president of Stanford University, who will be delivering the 2015 Robert H. Atwell Lecture. John Hennessy is a preeminent university leader among America's greatest institutions. Before becoming university president in 2000, his career at Stanford included service as assistant professor, full professor of electrical engineering, director of the Computer Systems Lab that supports research and systems design, chair of the Computer Science Department, dean of engineering, and provost at Stanford University. And they have been the beneficiary of his nearly 40 years of service to Stanford. This is a career-long commitment to a single institution that we don't see very often these days. But the institution becomes stronger and better as a result of sustained leadership and strategic directions. Surely Stanford has become a premier university under John's tutelage. Today, John will address us on the topic of information technology and the future of higher education, and I am pleased to also confer the Atwell Medallion in recognition of John Hennessy's extraordinary achievements. So please join me in welcoming John Hennessy.
Thank you, Molly. That was a wonderful introduction, one that my father would be proud of and my mother would believe, so I appreciate it. Today, I want to talk about the role of technology in the future of higher education. But my talk begins not with the assumption that something is deeply broken in American higher education, because it is not. American higher education is the envy of the world. Doesn't mean we can't do better, and that's what I want to focus on. How can we do a better job? When I think about technology and its role in teaching and learning, I see three possible ways we could deploy online technologies and information technology to help us learn better. First of all, to use it to increase access. Secondly, to reduce cost, but not learning. I don't think many people in higher education are interested in a trade-off that drives the cost down, but also results in poorer learning and poorer success for our students. That's not the equation we want to sign up for. And third, to improve learning and perhaps even degree completion in a cost-effective manner. I note that when we talk about teaching and learning, a critical issue which is often glossed over in many of the public pronouncements on how technology should be used is that high-quality credentialing is a critical part of what universities do. And it is critical to the value proposition that we offer to students and families. So let me start here just by saying something about higher education in an international context. In the United States and parts of the developing world, Western Europe, we are truly blessed. Higher education is generally something that many families and many students can aspire to. Completion rates are high, overall level of education is high. That is not the case in so many other parts of the developing world. And we, in the United States, have an opportunity, indeed a call to service, to help provide some method to educate the rest of the world. And that may be one of the most important things that we do when we put up a MOOC or we develop a course and distribute it globally. Because the truth is, in lots of the world, unless you can get a very low-cost way to provide education, you won't have any opportunity. But that's not the challenge we face predominantly in the United States. So while it's a role I think we certainly would like to engage in, it's not the challenge we face. Our challenge is one of cost and how well students complete and their performance and what they learn. This is a slide which I'm sure many of you have seen. It's a cost graph out of Archibald and Feldman that shows the rising cost rates. I note that lawyers and dentists are going up at the same rate. Now, I don't know that dentist is the group I want to affiliate with, but nonetheless, I can tell you one thing. even the worst classroom experience in any university is better than going to your dentist. Now, there are many things that contribute to this. There are both with the so-called Bowen and Baumol effects, but the dominant effect, certainly in the last 10 or 15 years, has been that wage inflation has driven our costs up. We have a highly educated workforce, our faculty, while we've gained relatively little in terms of productivity. And that effect continues on. Luckily, for many years, we were blessed in our public institutions to have great state support, and in our private institutions to be able to develop sources of development money and endowment to help finance that. So while the list price has gone up very fast, in fact, the actual net price has gone up much slower. But there's a problem I worry about here. I worry that, in fact, what is going to happen is we'll increasingly see the gap between net price and list price close, and colleges will go up faster and faster compared to inflation, and more importantly, compared to family incomes. We can see beginnings of that in the rising student debt, for example, that's gone up considerably in the last few years. We have to find a way to deal with that issue. Similarly, we have challenges of around what's happening in completion rate. This graph shows 6-year completion rates. I think we're doing well if you measure full-time students and you measure where students graduate, including transfer. But if you begin to measure how students who are at higher risk, many of whom go to our community colleges, if you measure students who go part-time or even a mix of part-time and full-time, we see that we're losing lots of students in the educational pipeline. The question is, can we use new technologies to try to help close that gap and improve learning and improve the success rate of our students? So, the question which is on many people have opined on, will online credentials simply replace undergraduate degrees? On the one side, you could say online technology has transformed lots of industries. That, in fact, what students want from their higher education is a set of skills. They want to be able to get that when they can get it, in any way they can get it. Of course, on the other side is the fact that an undergraduate degree is a lot more than a group of unrelated courses just joined together. We offer a value proposition that's rather different, and one today that employers put a lot of worth on. Our challenge will be to continue to do that. In the short term, I think there's no chance that a disaggregated group of online courses is going to replace an undergraduate bachelor's degree. In the longer term, we're going to have to make sure that we continue to enhance the value of what we offer in undergraduate education so that that doesn't happen. But what about the other markets? What about other things beyond undergraduate education? I just want to touch on that point briefly because I think this is where the transformation will occur. First, here we have a student community that may not be so easily accessible in a single physical situation, that has to take courses on a part-time basis. For example, people who are out working in a professional context and want to get a professional degree, something that advances their education. In such context, I expect, in fact, I predict, as hesitant as I always am to make predictions, there's a great quote by Alan Kay, the person who foresaw what we all think of as laptops now many years ago at Xerox PARC, who said it's easier to invent the future than it is to predict it. That is certainly true. So, but my first prediction is that, in fact, online technologies will dominate this marketplace. That continuing education, continuing professional education will move to online technologies. And increasingly, even professional master's degrees will move there, particularly when there isn't great value around engaging students in a more personal way. And we've already seen this happen. Online degrees, master's degrees in nursing, in social work, in teacher education, and the Georgia Tech experiment around an online master's degree in computer science all speak to this trend. So I expect this certainly to continue. What about MOOCs? MOOCs which were going to change all of higher education. MOOCs which were the answer when we aren't sure exactly what the question was. Well, MOOCs are not the answer. At least they're not the only answer to much of what challenges higher education in the United States. So when I think about MOOCs, the advantage that's cited, namely the ability to prepare a course and offer it to lots of students with relatively little personal interaction or faculty time, is exactly the challenge that MOOCs have. What makes them inexpensive also makes them very limited. Namely, you take a single course, you hand it out to lots of students. Those students vary widely in terms of their skill and their capability. For some students, the course is too fast. For some, it's too slow. For some, it's too deep. For some, it's too shallow. And that's even before you get to the issue of assessing how students do. Imagine a course with hundreds or thousands of students, some prepared, some less prepared. Imagine the final exam that should challenge the best students in the course so that they learn more and master the material even better, but should not crush a large fraction of the class with an exam that's simply too difficult for them. That becomes almost impossible in a very large course like that, where the students are not screened. I think, in fact, there are other ideas that work much better. I like this notion of what I call LSOCs, large selective online courses, not massive and not open to all comers who are not necessarily prepared for the material. In this case, I think hybrid learning models, things that combine different approaches, can actually work quite well. So hybrid models, flipped classroom notions. While MOOCs may not work exactly perfectly, hybrid models work quite well in this setting. We combine online instruction with a more personal interaction with the instructor. That kind of mixed hybrid model, flipped learning, flipped classroom, really does seem to work. And indeed, the experience that we've had and other institutions have had, the instructors report, compared to large lectures, there actually is greater student-faculty engagement because of the small interactive sessions. Our faculty in large to medium computer science courses with 75, 100, 200, 300 students, actually discovered no differences in student learning. The challenge will be to ensure that these learning mechanisms are really occurring. Is the student learning really equivalent? Can we really scale this well? So I think this is the most impressive experiment I've seen, and the single by far the best experiment I've seen. The experiment done by Ithaka using courses from the online learning initiative at MIT, at Carnegie Mellon, which developed a set of online statistic courses and piloted those courses at 7 institutions in New York. This is an introductory statistics course, the typical kind of thing that a group of students in the social sciences would take. And this shows you the differences in their learning mechanisms on the final exam, on a post-course exam, and on how many students pass the course. No significant difference between the online students and the students in a conventional classroom setting. Now remember, this is a flipped classroom. So even in the online setting, students are engaged in a session that involves faculty leadership working in an interactive fashion. It's not purely an online experience. But there's one difference that doesn't show up here, which is that the students in the online flipped classroom version reported spending 25% less time on the course. If students can master the same material in 25% less time, then perhaps they could take more material, or we could reduce the stress level. Many, many students in surveys report stress between the need to work part-time to cover the cost of their education and doing their classroom work and getting their education done. Perhaps we could actually improve that using these kinds of technologies. So, let me turn to what I think of as 6 challenges that we need to solve in the online education environment. The first is improving learning. Can we really improve learning? Can we measure that? The second are issues of attention span and how well students pay attention. which, by the way, doesn't work particularly well in a large lecture as well. One only needs to go to the back. It's a really great experiment. Go to the back of a large lecture hall sometime, stand in the back room. Students all have their laptops open, and they're all on Facebook or the web. So we need to improve and engage students better. We also need to begin to address other materials. Can we find more effective ways to grade more complex assignments? Because if we can't find ways to deal with assessment and grading, then attempts to scale up class sizes, for example, by the use of online technologies won't work. They won't work. What about issues like fraud and cheating? And I'll show you an example when, in fact, students get quite clever when we set them a hurdle and say, find a way to get this exam done in a given amount of time. They find creative ways to get the exam done. Group and project learning, a question of whether or not we can make those technologies work there. And finally, the issue which I think I want to talk about is the far future, further customization and individualized learning. So, what about improving learning with online technologies? Think about a live classroom. A good instructor in a live classroom has a sense of where the students are. Are they following? Are they grasping the material? Are they learning from questions? What kinds of questions do they ask? What do they come to office hours? What are they stuck on? And a good instructor will take that material, will stand back, will look at how students did on exams, and try to say, this section of the course could be better. Clearly, students are missing some key concept there. Unfortunately, when does it get fixed? Typically, it gets fixed the next time that instructor teaches the course. So there's a big loss there, a big opportunity lost to further educate our students. But think about the online world. Think about an environment where students are watching a video that's the lecture, 60 minutes long. Every 5 or 10 minutes, a quiz question comes up. Did you really understand that last 5 or 10 minutes? Were you actually awake during that last 5 to 10 minutes? Were you watching the video or were you playing a game on your computer? We begin to get that kind of material. But more importantly, we can get instant feedback. We can get data analytics. We can look at how many students got a particular question wrong. Perhaps then the lecture covering that principle isn't as good as it could be, and we can make that segment of the lecture better. Or how many students have to rewind and rewatch a particular section of a video. What does that tell us? The ability to get real-time data back on how our students are doing and how they're relating to material provides a valuable advantage over the current method we have. So I think we will actually see a dramatic use of online analytics as we move towards using more and more of these technologies. Courses will get better, faster, and students will benefit. What about attention span? Attention span is a challenge whether we're in a classroom with a lecture or whether we're in an online version. These is a set of measurements taken by a colleague at Rochester looking at courses using the edX platform and how long students paid attention to the video before they started to let their attention drift. And yes, the peak length of the video, what students pay the most attention, 6.5 minutes. 6.5 minutes, and more than half the students after that have put their attention elsewhere. That's it. So we've got to find ways to really engage them better, or they're going to drift away. They're going to drift away, and then when it comes to doing the homework or doing an exercise, what are they going to do? They're going to pull out the textbook or go look at some other video or review it because they weren't paying attention during that time. So what do? I think we have to think about ways in which we can make the course material more compelling, ways we can think about creating a better learning environment. One way I think this will happen, for high-demand introductory courses, we can add a lot of value. We can create high production values. We can add animation. We can add other things rather than just a talking head or some static PowerPoint slides. That can create a more effective learning environment. It's not cheap. It's going to mean that you have to be willing to spend probably millions of dollars to really do a high-quality course and develop it really well. But if that course could be repurposed at hundreds or even 1,000 institutions, then we could afford to make that kind of investment in the quality of the course material. And I think done well, only the very best instructors will be able to compete with really high-quality courses. So we'll have this high-quality material. It will free up the instructor to spend more time engaging with the students. Perhaps that's engaging with the students who are struggling, or it's engaging with a student who is truly exceptional and is ready to move on to some more difficult material. That key role, I think, will become more and more important as we go forward. What about grading more complex material? Because certainly a lot of time of instructors and teaching assistants goes into the whole grading process. Can we do better? Today we can do very simple things. We can do multiple choice. We can do other kinds of simple exams. For computer programs, we can grade them automatically by devising a mechanism to test the program out. Logic proofs, we can do that way. What about the use of peer grading? Well, I think peer grading can be valuable, but I think all of us as instructors become very nervous when we start to use peer grading for high-stakes exams without a lot of faculty involvement, and rightly so. So peer grading can have a role to play, but can't replace it. I think with progress that's been made in natural language, in complex matching technologies, in summarization technologies, we will in the near future be able to grade short answer assignments very accurately, purely by computer-based techniques. We'll probably also be able to use some machine learning techniques to grade more complex things. Think about how a good instructor grades a difficult problem on an exam. They take those test papers, and then they divide them. The easy ones, they're right. Another set of easy ones, they're not even close. And then all the ones in the middle that take a long time to grade because you try to figure out what the student is heading towards. That process we can automate. With the guidance of a human rubric, we can get a machine learning system to begin to grade those kinds of things better and better over time. The thing that will be very difficult is grading essays or compositions in an automated fashion. We can grade syntax just fine, but grading semantics and true in-depth meaning is just very hard today. What about fraud and cheating? Well, today we already have a challenge. Put an exam out, and I've seen cases where within a half an hour, all the exam questions are up on the net. And within less than 2 hours, the answers are up. That's how quickly things move with students today. We've also got issues of identity, and how do we verify identity? And here I want to tell you a simple story about what happened when one of the first MOOCs was offered at Stanford. My colleague, Jennifer Whittam, was teaching a course on databases. She offered the courses, and at the end, the students had a final exam. They had an 8-hour period in which to complete the exam. They could start any time in that 8 hours, and they had 2 hours once they started to finish the exam online. She sees one exam come in. Student has almost a perfect score, and only 5 minutes of elapsed time to do the whole exam. Einstein reincarnated. No. A little detective work shows that there are 3 exams submitted from the same IP address. The student had registered for the course 3 times under 3 separate names. First exam came in, not such a good grade. Student gets back the graded material immediately. Resubmits under name number 2. We're getting closer. The 3rd time is the charm. Now, this was a MOOC. It was free. But I think if you charge $50 for a MOOC, that may not inhibit this kind of behavior. We've got to find ways to identify and verify students. I think we can do this with a variety of techniques, verifying biometrically or with other highly individualized techniques. It turns out if you ask people to type about 3 sentences, you can get their identity with very high probability because we all type at slightly different speeds and slightly different letter combinations go together differently. We can also find ways to deal with solution sharing by randomizing exams. Admittedly, hard to do because we've got to have a large selection of questions and we have to know that the exams are fairly balanced in terms of the quality and the difficulty of the questions. But we can begin doing sophisticated analysis techniques. So I think we can actually make a fair amount of progress on this as we devote our minds to solving the problem. What about small group experiences, project-based learning, something which I think we believe is a critical part of higher education? Online technologies have a long way to go for some of these kinds of courses, particularly large, highly interactive settings, the kind of thing you might see in business school or law school where 50 or 60 students are engaged in real debate. There's been a lot of preparation before the class, and there's real interaction. That's a hard thing to duplicate in an online setting. But smaller group experiences, I think we are finding ways to create highly motivating, highly effective environments for small group settings. Those come from some key insights. First of all, we build technology around that. We build technology to manage teams, to allow teams to interact online. The fact that you can create a video conference right like that with a group of people certainly makes it a lot easier than it's been before. And we've done some experiments at Stanford using these kinds of technologies to develop courses out of the D School that try to build design thinking, that include peer feedback, and trying to develop ways in which students can learn both how to receive peer critique, but also how to give good peer critique, and how to interact in a way with a team and build teamwork. The platform is the key here. It supports team interaction. It supports peer feedback in important ways. And I think this is a problem which looks difficult at the beginning, but actually I think we'll make a fair amount of progress on. So, what do we have to do to really ensure that this technology is used well? If you go back to the 1960s, there was a vision early on that we would develop high-quality, fully automated, computer-assisted instruction, and that it would solve all our problems, whether they be in K-12 or in higher education. It would use basic online material. It would highly customize things. You would have automated tutorials. But it didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? I think the first reason is that it turns out that human learning is very complex. It's hard to predict. It's hard to understand. It's why good teachers are really valuable individuals, because it's hard to understand how students grapple with things, what they understand, what they don't understand, and how to help them master the material. So that's the first reason. The second reasoning is you need a lot of computer technology. You need the ability to do basic reasoning, to do natural language. Indeed, this problem, just like the advent of artificial intelligence, has taken a lot longer to play out than we ever thought. And you need a lot more computer power than we ever thought you would need to do these problems. All those pieces are key. I think the other part of this is we've realized that there's probably no way to do this without developing course materials that are highly specialized to the particular course they're involved in. We're not going to solve this problem by developing a framework that we pour in facts and it pours out courseware for a particular course. It isn't going to happen. Too hard a problem. So then what might we achieve? So this is my final thought on this topic. I think if we work hard, over the next 20 years, we can develop a set of customized courses that provide adaptive depth and speed, that tune to the student, that when a student gets stuck on a particular problem, says, well, there are two things to understand to grasp this principle. You have to understand part A and part B. If you don't get the whole idea, let's break it down. Let's figure out if you understand part A of the concept, and then we can work on part B of the concept. Right now, we just have repetition as a learning technique. But imagine having an adaptive technique that responds to students just as a good instructor might respond to students. We can have automated quizzes and tutorial materials available. And I think mostly that will happen for larger standardized courses that many of us reuse in very similar formats. I think we'll deploy hybrid learning for lots of other situations because that will create a more compelling learning environment for our students. That will free up time of instructors. It'll free up time that they can spend more time with individual students, that they can create smaller, high-touch learning experiences that cannot be done in a larger lecture setting, that can motivate the student who's struggling in a course and help them out. That's what we ought to be doing with our faculty time. My goal is simple then. My goal is to create an education that is affordable, accessible, adaptable, and enhances student learning. But we'll get there only with the intense collaboration and cooperation of our many faculty who touch the lives of our students every single day. With them, we can transform and make higher education in the United States even better than it is today. Thank you for your kind attention.